Hi, Russell. Welcome to the cave.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure
you so
being
much.
here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that attorneys are very busy, so we really appreciate it. And before I start asking you the questions, I was wondering if you can maybe just introduce yourself briefly to all the child protection social workers who will be watching this recording.
Perhaps you're not as busy as social workers, so I know how busy social workers are. But
Good point.
yeah, my name is Russel Linde. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 35 years.
Wow.
Studied at UCT, did my LLB there, and then have been in practice for 35 years since. Done a lot of work on children's work. In fact, I left law for 10 years to concentrate on a children's program, which is still running now.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
but that's my experience.
Yeah, so that many years of experience. So we have
Yes.
wisdom. We have wisdom here today. And so
we don't know. We'll see.
So we're very grateful. Russell, today we're just going to focus on one or two things. The first question I want to ask you on behalf of child protection social workers in South Africa is, you know, child protection social workers do end up in court because of the type of work that they do, the statutory nature of the work that we do. And many child protection social workers get rattled or unsettled in court, sometimes just because of the mere presence of an attorney or being cross-examined. I was wondering if you could share with us maybe one or two top strategies that attorneys use to unsettle any professional, maybe not just even a child protection social worker.
Look, in the first instance, social workers mustn't feel alone. There are very few people I know who are happy to be cross-examined in court. It's tough. It's quite an ordeal. Because you're the subject of a question. You can't ask the questions.
Yeah.
So it always makes it more difficult. But so for me, I don't necessarily have a specific strategy. I like to broaden my options. And if I've got a strategy, I sometimes limit those options. So one is always cautious of preempting a situation in court. But matters are generally driven by facts, okay? And the facts are then applied to the case, to the law. But in my instance, you know, if I have to give you some ideas about what invariably I generally end up using as sort of common strategies, I would say look at unsettling or making the social worker uncertain. Now, generally that's not difficult because sometimes social workers are not completely sure of their facts or applying their facts to the law. Okay, and I'll deal with it later because there are other issues that I want to just raise with you around this. I'm just giving you highlighted points. The other one is to try and make a social worker contradict herself, either on, excuse me, saying herself. I'm not suggesting that males aren't social workers as well.
No, 100%.
But generally, females are social workers. We try and get the social worker to contradict themselves either on the facts or on the law. And then also, you know, there's instances when social workers overlook certain facts or they underestimate them. And that can be a mistake because if a good lawyer uncovers some facts that the social worker hasn't reported on, it makes them very unsettled when you confront them with those facts. Okay. And then perhaps, you know, if you look at the uncertainty issue, when you get to a point where you feel the social worker is feeling a little bit uncomfortable because you've asked one or two questions that not quite persuasive on, you then drill down on those points and you drill down. And because you're drilling down on that point, they start becoming flustered because they feel they're not answering you the way they should. Meantime, they may well be, their facts may be fine, but they're just uncomfortable about their facts. They're becoming uncertain about those facts.
You're creating doubt in the social work.
Yes.
By the way, and you do that by the way that you ask them or with the actual question, would you say?
Both. You can do it both ways. So, and in fact, you can do it in one. So you can ask it on a fact and twist it or ask it in a way that that fact becomes very onerous.
Yeah.
So the degree of uncertainty escalates.
Yeah.
And once you go into that field, when you reveal that you're uncertain, you just open yourself for a real barrage.
So when the child protection social worker starts showing that she is becoming uncertain or doubting her own story, then the lawyer is gonna.
Yeah. Remember, we've got a judge, somebody sitting as an arbitrator, a commissioner, children's court commissioner.
Yeah.
Who's watching.
Yeah.
And a demeanor doesn't help. You know, if a social worker appears uncertain or a little bit inconsistent or uncomfortable, it's not good for the demeanor, and that demeanor is not good for the arbitrator or the commissioner drawing conclusions about the evidence.
Okay.
Well, can I really rely on this evidence?
So demeanor matters.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't appear confident over your decision or your answer, then that matters. Because why aren't you convinced? Why aren't you happy about your answer?
So just to summarize what you've said, an attorney will try and make you seem uncomfortable with what you've already reported, whether it be in the report or verbally, and then.
Yeah. So the report's there. The magistrate, generally a good magistrate or commissioner, has read the report, and understands what's going to happen. But then the magistrate's not anticipating the lawyer's questions, and that's where the magistrate / commissioner is watching.
Yeah.
How does this person respond, and the demeanor and the manner in which they respond and what they say. Okay. So from a lawyer's point of view, then the good lawyer will generally know the facts. So will have done quite a lot of research before they've actually gone into court. They've got the report before them. Remember, the social worker doesn't have any report from the lawyer.
Yeah.
So she's not prepared. Whereas the lawyer is a lot more prepared, because I've read your report and I've done some background research, and I might even have chatted to some of your sources, etc., etc. And I just start asking questions, and the social worker soon becomes uncomfortable, because they start asking themselves, but I'm sure I met with that person, but did I really ask those questions? Should I have not asked this question? And next thing, they're flustered. And that's a breeding ground for error.
Sure. Okay.
Because you want to challenge the impartiality. What are you saying to the social workers? You've actually not been impartial here. You've not been objective. You've not looked at the facts. All you've done is, for example, I'll give you quotes just now. You accuse the social worker of being biased in favor of the biological parent, for example. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There are times when a social worker also becomes overconfident with the matter.
All right, overconfident.
And in doing so, they'll either overlook or ignore certain facts, or place too much emphasis on some facts. Okay. So if I'll deal with when I give you solutions later, but you must always anticipate being cross-examined by somebody who's competent. Okay. Somebody who's done some research.
So never underestimate whoever the legal representative might be.
Yeah. You may get some people who are just acrimonious, and you can actually deal with that, because the magistrate, if they do their job well, will stop a lawyer being vicious or acrimonious, because a children's court is not a place for that. It's not a place for adversarial approach. Okay. So just be careful of opening a door for a lawyer to exploit.
Okay.
And because that's what they're gunning for. They're wanting to show the court that you either uncertain, or you contradicted yourself, your evidence can't be relied on, or you're not being impartial. Okay. So are there solutions to this?
All right, so that's the next question. So,
okay.
And many of the child protection social workers have experienced that. They may not have been able to word it exactly like you, but they walk out of court, they want to blow up, they want to cry, they get to the office, they want to speak to their colleagues. Some of them resign, and some of the research we've done says, many child protection social workers exit this statutory field. One of the reasons being, not one, there are many, but one of them being the very taxing, stressful environment of court, and having to deal with that on top of factors like high caseloads, etc. So you've mentioned some of the tactics that attorneys use. Could you be a nice attorney and give us some tips on how to respond to that, and maybe prepare a little bit better, so that we aren't flustered as easily?
Yeah. Look, as I say, it's not easy to not be flustered, because many of us get in those positions where we are the subject of cross-examination stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, the obvious thing is try and avoid not to appear unsettled.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And I know it's easier said than done, but actually think about it before you go into court. That get yourself into court, familiarize yourself with the surroundings. Don't rush into court and suddenly put your files on the table and then be ready.
Okay.
You must be sitting there waiting. You must be familiar with your surroundings. Just get yourself comfortable.
All right. So that's
don't let the circuit.
So sorry to interrupt you. So if you're thinking of like very young child protection social workers, then that's something that they could do, and they could speak to their senior colleagues. Maybe just go to the courtroom, and even if you're a seasoned child protection social worker, make sure you go ahead of time, sit, feel it, and emotionally prepare for the playground. Which
part of your training, you know, part of a junior's training, social workers training, should be going to court with the senior social worker.
Yeah.
Just to sit there, sometimes even to help, have a file open, have documents ready to help, just so that you get familiar with the nuances of questions being thrown at you.
Absolutely. Okay.
Because you can't be ready for those questions. 9 out of 10 you may be ready for, but there's one's going to catch you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, don't be unsettled by that question. Doesn't matter if you can't answer. If you can't answer a question, don't answer it. You can't answer it.
Okay, so let's just talk about that, Russell. So
don't manufacture our answer.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good thing. So I think sometimes, and I'm trying to speak on behalf of many of them, doesn't mean it's true for all of them, but some child protection social workers, when they engage with an attorney, I think they feel a natural and automatic pressure to give the attorney what they want. So if they ask a question, you know, it's like they just give it away. And I've often, you know, I've been taught when I was much less experienced in child protection social work that, for instance, you don't have to give, if an attorney emails you and requests a report or information, you are not obligated to give that information. In fact, you could acknowledge receipt and then kindly refer and respectfully refer the attorney to the children's court. Now, in the same sense, when there's a verbal engagement between a child protection social worker and attorney, I think often they feel that they have to answer. So if you're in court and the attorney is asking the child protection social worker, whatever the question might be, and say, for instance, the social worker doesn't remember or actually doesn't know, what would be the best response, do you think?
Look, if it's a material question and you don't know the answer, that's dangerous. So I prefer not to have a no as an answer to a material question. Sometimes a lawyer can just be fishing, you know, he's out on a fishing expedition and just waiting for you to bite.
Okay.
There's no harm in you stopping and asking him a question in return, saying, "Oh, sorry, I didn't understand that. What were you trying to get at?" Don't be intimidated.
Yeah.
So
easier said than done.
No, I know, and that comes from experience.
Yeah.
But it also comes from confidence.
Okay.
If you're confident about your case, you'll be very I don't want to say defiant, but you'll be very comforted in the way you respond to sort of sweeping questions.
Yes.
You know? So if you don't know the answer, say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure about that. What do you mean? What is your question? Just give me further information, give me further details. What is it exactly that you're driving at? Put it back into, so it's giving you a little bit of time to think.
Okay, good. That's a good tip. Thanks.
Yeah, it's giving you a little bit of time to think.
Any more tips?
And another thing, I don't want to repeat them all at once, but I'll get to the next one. But so the point here is about this uncertainty or unsettling issue. You must be confident. And you're only confident if you know your facts, if you know your matter. If you go there semi-prepared, you're really going to look for trouble.
Yeah.
You're going to be knocked over. So don't underestimate the need to prepare before you go into court, so that you know what you're talking about. You're familiar. It's at the tips of your tongue, you know.
Yeah. Know your facts, be prepared, and go familiarize yourself with the environment.
Yeah. Okay. And then, you know, linked to this point is slow down. Don't be rushed. If he says to you, no, I'm waiting, just say, well, then you can wait. Just hang on. Just give me a minute. I'm just trying to get my facts correct here.
Okay.
Go back to your report. Say, hang on, let me just have a look at my report. Go to your report and use that as a mechanism to just slow the process down so that you don't rush an answer. When you rush an answer, you 9 out of 10 times say something that you prefer not to have said.
Yes.
You know,
And use that.
So avoid that. I mean, there is the golden rule that less is more. So if you can say less in your answer to an attorney. But you can't say less where it doesn't give an answer, because then he's going to come and badger you, and he's going to use it as a weapon against you.
And just answer the question, not don't offer additional information, would you say?
No, don't offer anything additional. Because that's helping him.
Yeah, or her.
Okay, or her. Okay. So as I say, don't allow yourself to be rushed.
Okay.
So try and get into a position where you feel reasonably comfortable before you answer. And if you can get into a habit in all your appearances, just to be in a position where you are not forced to give an answer, you're not feeling compelled to rush an answer. That's the better situation to be in.
Okay. Very good tip, yeah. Okay,
I mentioned earlier about being ready, but prepare and read your report.
Yeah.
Okay. In my view, I tell social workers to prepare your report, and then leave it, and sleep on it, and go and read it again the next day. Because when you reread it, you've got a little bit more of a critical eye.
Okay.
And you pick up things that may be semi-contradictory or doesn't fit in, and it just gives you an opportunity to revisit it.
Absolutely.
So I would be wary of that when I was preparing a report, that I would make sure that I just gave it a bit of opportunity to settle in my mind.
Yes.
But another golden rule when you're preparing a report is prepare it as though you know you're going to be scrutinized on it.
Okay. Prepare for the worst.
Sorry?
Prepare for the worst.
Yeah, prepare for the worst. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean that, I know that's easier said than done, because I know in South Africa, we probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were short of at least 13,000 social workers.
Yeah.
Now that is a tragedy, because social workers play a huge role in South Africa, or in any society.
Absolutely.
So what happens is social workers have got too much work.
Yeah.
And if you've got 200 files, think about it. Is it a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult.
So for sure, I know it's a fact. Can you look at every file every day? No. So 30 days in a month.
And I was just thinking that earlier when you spoke about, writing your court report, letting it lie, taking a breather, returning to the report. And I think I can almost hear some of the child protection social workers on ground level going, excuse me, do you know the reality? But,
I do.
But no, I know you know. So do I, but nonetheless, for them to maybe do better in court, when there might be an attorney who is going to be absolutely focused on ripping the social worker apart, that's where these tips come in, and so it's still very relevant, even though the workload makes it almost.
The problem is, you've prepared your report. So if you haven't prepared your report as thoroughly as you might have, and it becomes one of those matters that is litigated,
yes,
you're done. The report's there before the court.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you feel uncomfortable, you can try and do a supplementary report, but then, it opens itself to all sorts of. But I think 20 minutes or 30 minutes spent longer on a report is way more valuable than a fight later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that in situ, in the facts of a matter, that's not easy, because social workers are so hard pressed for time.
Yeah.
And their time is very valuable, because they're going from one crisis to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
One family where children are being abused to another family where children are exposed. So it's tough. It's a very tough environment.
Absolutely.
And then you're dealing with statute.
Yeah.
Then you're dealing with the state as well.
Yeah.
And that compounds the problem.
So I mean, that's the whole rationale for the caves. Very small efforts to help them to do better, for the sake ultimately of the children. There's a lot of very at-risk children who are very dependent on these child protection social workers. So helping them is of great importance. Anything else?
I'll deal with that, because social workers are gatekeepers.
Absolutely.
That's why I say they play such a fundamental role in society. They're gatekeepers for children. Nobody else is.
Yeah.
You can't say the police are, and the doctors are, or teachers are. Yes, they play a role, but social workers, really, They're the one that take up the cudgels, and they're the ones who have to work on making sure a child's protected.
Yeah, manage the entire case from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Any other tips?
Yeah, so, sorry?
Any other tips to help a little bit better?
You know, I because of time, it's quite difficult to give tips because the tips all link on time issues. But in your if you're preparing your report, just make sure. I mean, social workers know who they need to go to for their sources.
Yes.
Just make sure you know those sources.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
So for example, I'll come across cases where a social worker has interviewed a family member, maybe a granny, but she doesn't ask the granny her factual background. So she's not quite sure where the granny fits in other than it's maternal or paternal. And actually, the information that she extracts from that granny is insufficient or has potentially got gaps in it. So I will come along and I'll say, I'll challenge that source. And then I'll drill down on that source. You know, why did you go to that source? Where did you interview that source? What information did you get that source? How can you rely on that information? Because that source was too close to the family. And so you just make sure your sources are reliable.
And then eventually that's how you unsettle the social worker, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
You know, also social workers make use of experts. The instances where they may make use of a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Okay. If you do make use of them, make sure you use them properly. Or if you decide not to use them, make sure you know why.
Okay.
Because I'm watching that.
Okay.
And I might know that there's a psychologist or psychiatrist who's been involved. And I will go to that person.
Yeah.
And I will find out why they weren't used. So just be careful about that type of thing. Don't ignore your experts.
Absolutely. So that really does, you've kind of started answering my second last question, which is, what are some of the most damning mistakes that you've seen in the court reports of child protection social workers?
First thing that comes up in my mind, cutting and pasting.
Oh, that's bad.
What you do is you borrow from your other reports, and the intention is I understand the intention because saving you time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information on the cutting and pasting that does play a role in this report that you're preparing. But man, the amount of times they've contradicted themselves, it's quite sad actually.
Yeah.
Because there's just going to be the death of them.
Yeah, no, I think
I've had social workers, for example, in the old Transkei, the Eastern Cape, where I've challenged them on their report, and they eventually concede that they actually never went to the family. They never went to the home where in their report, they say that this interview, that interview, they never went there. And then it transpires that they didn't go there because they didn't have a vehicle. And they don't have a cell phone. And so those are the real tough conditions social workers. Yeah.
That's reality. But still, we have an ethical obligation.
Exactly.
Okay, so
and then
cut and paste. Don't cut and paste.
Yeah, the next thing is...
Okay.
For sure. Because, I mean, even you'll pick it up.
Yeah.
The next one is that you don't cover your facts well or sufficiently. So for example, you know, there's a child that's removed from a home because it's suffering from kwashiorkor. Okay. And the child's put in hospital, and could spend as much as 6 to 7, 8 months in hospital recovering. Yeah. And the mother just never comes to look after the child, care for the child, see the child, visit the child. And then after 8, 9 months, the social worker wants to place the child straight back with the mother. Okay, without checking the facts, etc. What's the mother like at home? Why did she leave this child? Why was she suffering from kwashiorkor? They just ignore those facts.
Okay.
Family is first.
Yes.
Okay, there's a danger in that because what you do is you you ignore material facts that have a major impact on the decision that you should be making. Okay, the next one is if you're unsure about the implications of the act, and then you interpret it to fit your facts, for example.
And you are now referring to the Children's Act.
Yeah, I'm referring to the Children's Act because that act should be on your desk.
Absolutely.
That act should be on your desk as a social worker.
So have you come across some social workers, child protection social workers, not quoting the Children's Act?
I've come across social workers who don't have the act available at all in their office. Yeah.
That's horrible.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's just the analysis that was done on the Children's Act before it was implemented. They do a budget on every piece of legislation that's implemented in the country.
Yeah.
And there's a high road, they call what is called a high road. I'm talking very quickly now, high road and a low road.
Okay.
The low road is the minimum that you require to implement a piece of legislation. The high road is the best, obviously, the Rolls Royce. And in South Africa, in 2010, the estimate was about 70 to 80 billion rand to implement the act. Remember, it crosses 5 departments, okay? Deals with 5 departments. And they said the low road would have been about 12, 13 million. South Africa was spending 6 billion at the time.
Sure.
Yeah. So you can understand why there are so many gaps in our system, so many terrible gaps, why children fall through those gaps.
That's true.
So one of them is because they can't afford to train social workers properly. And we don't have to go down that road. But so we're not talking about the interpretation. I'll give you an example. For example, there'll be an overemphasis on culture. Okay? And what does that mean? It means that it says the primary purpose of a family or of a state is to encourage family. Okay? They want to encourage family, which is first prize. But this piece of legislation was enacted for a reason. It's because we're aware that families are dysfunctional.
Yes.
Or that there are broken families.
Yes.
And they are broken. And that's a life issue. And you can't just wave a wand and say families are all fine. No, that child has come out of a dysfunctional family, and either we can restore that family to functionality or we can't. But we can't do it at the expense of the child.
Yes.
And there are many instances where we see that the child is placed back in those families where they are broken still. Because there's an overemphasis on family, on culture, or even on race.
Yeah. So the balance, there must be a balance, and ultimately what is the best for the child as stipulated in Section 7 then?
Yeah, as you know, in terms of the Act, I mean, there are some instances and there are many cases in our case law that support a child's position, a child's rights being elevated above the parents' rights.
Absolutely.
Biological parents' rights.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, one understands why. And that's one of those reasons. Okay. Right. So those are some of the mistakes. I can mention more, but maybe you don't have enough time. But
maybe give us one more. That's a killer.
Okay. For example, the social worker will emphasize some area of the law above another area. So there will be instead of looking at a child's best interest from an objective perspective, there's a bit of partiality involved. And so they overemphasize something like reunification, all right, where the family are really broken. Okay, I know I've mentioned dysfunctional in my previous point, but this is a different issue around your emphasis in the law rather than a misinterpretation of it. So we know that if a child has been taken been removed from a home and placed in foster care, for example, there should be a reunification plan of some sort.
Yes.
But sometimes the implementation of that reunification plan is done notwithstanding that the parents, the biological mother or father or both, are simply not capable or competent of carrying out or performing, where it actually places the child in a more dangerous position.
Yes.
Sometimes it's better for the child not to be in those parents' company because there's anxieties that arise. I mean, you must have come across that.
Yeah.
The children, because they've been beaten, because there's been, So but because there's such an overemphasis on reunification, they forget that actually the child's protection is paramount.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then some social workers seem to focus on one aspect of one section of the Children's Act, maybe, and neglect to look at everything else. There's no comprehensive view of all the facts. It's just kind of focusing on one or two things, and that comes out of recommendations.
So sometimes our society is can be accused of placing too much emphasis on the biological parents' rights, and in doing so, what they do is the child's rights are no longer paramount. So the best interests are not paramount, and the effect of that is that the parents are afforded more protection than the child is. I'm missing one of the points that I had in my mind that I wanted to mention. It will probably come before I finish, but there's a problem in South African society of children being assets. They're belongings, that they're owned by me, as opposed to them being seen as a person, as an individual. And that's a problem. You know, a child will be placed in foster care or in an extended family care for 6 years from birth. And then the mother has finished studying and says, no, I've never seen the child. And then comes out of the blue and after 6 years says, I want my child back.
No, goodness. Yeah, it's very complex.
Those are instances that I've come across. Okay, I know they're probably not
every day, but
they're not everyday occurrences, or not super common, but they are not uncommon.
No,
the type of I own that child. As opposed to the child's got, it's an individual, it's a person.
Something like attachment, bonding, and also the voice of the child, of course, obviously.
Well, that's another aspect that the new act has given, which children never had previously. So that's
which is wonderful.
But those are the mistakes that social workers make.
Thank you so much for that. And before we end this conversation, thank you very much. I think you've given us really valuable insights into the psyche of an attorney. And I hope that some of the child protection social workers will, even if it's just to take one thing away from what you've said, that would be great. Because ultimately, if the child protection social workers can do better in all their tasks, whether it's the investigation, decision-making process, compiling the report and conducting themselves in court, if we can just all do a little bit better, I think ultimately children will be advantaged, because they are the focus of all this work. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure.
And to conclude, and I think the social workers will enjoy this especially, have a word of encouragement, some acknowledgement from your side, from the world of attorneys, to child protection social workers for the work that they do and their perseverance in fighting a good fight, ultimately, most of them.
I know my experience, many social workers who start out studying as social workers don't anticipate or don't appreciate the very tough task that it is.
Not at all.
And I think it's a totally underestimated profession. And I think that the calling is tough, very tough. And social workers need support. I really think they need support, because they play very often, in my view, they play a thankless role.
Yes.
If I'm in court with a social worker, having to fight with that social worker, I'm not doing it because I want to. I'm doing it because I think that the child's rights have been prejudiced by that social worker. I think that the social worker hasn't applied her mind properly to it, and I would prefer to deal with it outside of court. But if the social worker is dogmatic and persists, then I'll fight them in court. But other than that, I'd much prefer to engage around a table, for example.
Yes, absolutely.
Social workers, because that's a better way of dealing with the child's issues. But gatekeepers social workers are gatekeepers for children's rights. And that's a huge responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I think that often that they fly that kite on a very lonely road. They're alone. And I think they should call for help when they feel they need help. very often we as professionals don't look for help. We like to try and resolve everything ourselves. And that's maybe not this, I know it's easier said than done because time is of the essence, but stop and call for help if needs be at times. Because you're walking a tough road. My view is that social workers are a respected profession, and remember they're professionals. They're not civil servants. They're professionals who are regarded by society as such, and in particular, in my experience, the commissioners of magistrates courts or magistrates themselves view a social worker as a professional and they respect them. And if they submit a report to the magistrate, my experience is the magistrate very rarely contradicts the professional.
Yes. No,
and he does it because he respects that professional.
Yes.
But if you produce a report that is tardy or unprofessional or contradictory, you'll lose that magistrate's respect.
Absolutely.
So my encouragement is to remember that society needs you. I think you play a fundamental role in society, particularly in South Africa, because we've got many, many broken families.
Yes.
And the burden on you is far greater than, for example, social workers in the UK or the USA. South African social workers are in the cut and thrust of things. And it's a really tough, rocky road. And I think a person who becomes a social worker has taken on a very, very serious role. I know I'm sounding a bit dramatic.
No.
But it's a very serious role.
No.
It really is a very serious role. And
I don't think it's dramatic at all.
Remember that you're professionals and people see you as a professional. Yeah. So just don't abuse it.
Yeah, absolutely. Russel, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to hear what the social workers have to say about this conversation.
Yeah, me too.